Hello, friends. Welcome to the Cold War Prepper, and we are so excited tonight. Golly, I tell you what, I evidently let me apologize first off. It appears when you do a search that we had two different links out there, and I know a lot of you clicked on the other link and it said it was going live at 8 o'clock Eastern. That was a boo-boo I did about a month ago. And so I tried to delete that. My apologies. It's not showing anywhere on my StreamYard or on my uh, YouTube. I apologize for that. I thought I had totally deleted that. So I apologize for the inconvenience. But thank you for sticking with us because we have Prepping with Sarge. And I'm going to let him tell a little bit more about himself. But his expertise is dealing with emotional trauma. And so he does that for a profession. And one of the things that I have the greatest amount of concern about in a post-apocalyptic world are those people who have psychological trauma at varying levels of how much that trauma is affecting them, how we can effectively give first aid, and then self-identifying. Is there something we can do to say, hey, we're going into a state where we may become incapacitated if we don't grab a hold of this? And if we can do that, what can we do to get hold of it so we don't go into an incapacitated state? So I'm going to ask Prepping with Sarge to introduce himself, tell you a little bit about his bona fide so that you understand that he is a professional. While he's doing that, I'm going to go grab a real quick piece of medicine. So I'll be right back.
All right. Well, thank you, Lee. Appreciate that. And thank you, everybody. I know there was some chat going on with the other link. Thank you, everybody who came back over here. Sorry about all the confusion with all of that. But yeah, I know some of the people in chat already. I am Prepping with Sarge. Sarge is just a nickname. I am not a veteran, and I am not law enforcement or anything like that. And I am by trade, my primary trade is I am a licensed therapist. I've been in the field of mental health for over 25 years, worked in all different sectors, private, for-profit, not-for-profit, government, you name it, basically, and with different populations along the way, everything from little kids to seniors. Currently, I am working predominantly with first responders and some veterans. I've worked with people who were, in the past, I've worked with people who were prison release. I've worked with really severe illnesses like schizophrenia. I've worked with autism spectrum disorder. So a little bit of everything throughout the course of my career. Right now, my focus, though, is trauma with first responders. And I'll try my best to answer as many questions as I can. If you could throw them in caps, it'll help us to catch them. We've got a lot of ground to cover tonight, so we'll try to get to as much of it as we can. But yeah, and on YouTube, I'm at Prepping with Sarge is my main channel. I do preparedness content on there. I do have a mental health channel as well. I'll drop a link for that at some point here. And I'm on Instagram as Prepping with Sarge, and I've got a Facebook channel, Prepping with Sarge. If you look on any of those, you should be able to find me.
Fantastic. So if I could ask my moderators, and I have the best moderators on YouTube. Thank you all so much for being here with me. Hello, Thorhaven Farm. I like for us to share each other's links, and I would ask that we have a lot of fantastic channels that are here following tonight with us. So if my moderators would show all those links, if you would do me a favor, hi, Prepping by Faith. If you would do me a favor, just click on that, subscribe, watch one or two of their videos, and see if it's not something you might think you might be able to support. I would greatly appreciate that. And then if we could also especially put Prepping with Sarge's, both of his channels, his preparedness channel and his mental health channel. One of the things that he does that I think is very, very special, and I think it's something we could all do. One of those things we can do for our own mental health is gardening. That's what I'm trying to do, although that's proven to be more frustrating than relaxing. But I think I have a feeling that Sarge's personal way of dealing with stuff is foraging, because he does a lot of good foraging. stuff on his channel. So if you're into foraging, that's also something that he does. I think you need to take a look at. So let's start off. So let's take a scenario here, and let's say that SHTF happened, and this is going to vary by time, okay? Because I have a feeling that people are going to, at different points in the development of the cataclysm, there's going to be different stressors that are going to occur, and there's going to be different tripping points. And so let's just say things have happened. It's been a half hour, and all of a sudden people are starting to, you can tell people are starting to lose it. Define what starting to lose it looks like, and how we can identify that somebody's in that mental arena right there, that we need to take action.
So there's two, if we just kind of really simplify it in terms for mental health first aid purposes, I would like preppers to think about this as really just two groups. You're going to have people who are really, really, we call it severe and persistent mental illness. This is like your schizophrenia, schizoaffective, things like that. And these people they're generally in the United States, our first line of defense with something that severe is going to be medications. Other countries handle it a little bit differently, but I'm going to speak to, my training here in this country. And so with the lack of access to medications, that population I would expect is going to get very, very ill. And it won't take long, like less than 30 days. And the hospitals would be, if they're even functioning in like a really big collapse kind of scenario, if they're functioning at all, are going to be way overcrowded. So you're not going to be able to take your loved one and get them admitted. It's not going to be possible. Right. So that's group one. And we'll try to talk about what we can do for them too. Group two is the bulk of the population, which is, maybe you've got some depression or some anxiety or some trauma from your past, or maybe you don't have any of those things. But when things start getting real, real bad, everybody's going to start being exposed to some pretty stressful situations, and everybody is going to be prone to trauma symptoms and anxiety symptoms and probably depression as well, right? So you have the group that we know is going to, without medications and treatment, is going to deteriorate and get very, very ill. And then we have the rest of the population that's probably not been experienced with this, that's all of a sudden going to be dealing with stressors like we've never seen before in our lifetime.
And one of the things we have to understand is that different groups of people react to things differently.
Right.
And so there are going to be those who react. We were talking before the show, and my analogy is in the Army, you've got a guy who today's a superhero, and then tomorrow he won't even get out of his sleeping bag. There's this adrenaline rush you get at times, and I experienced that when I was driving ambulances. The minute you hop in the ambulance, your adrenaline goes up. And then when you pull back in and clean up the ambulance afterwards, all of a sudden, everything that you just did and everything you saw comes rushing in. And that's when you kind of get this exhaustion, just and mental, second guessing, I guess you'd call it. But the stress of that is unbelievable. So the way you react now is not a guarantee of the way you're going to react in the future.
Right.
And likewise, somebody who is stoic now could prove to be a hero tomorrow. So can you talk about how different people react to different events in different ways?
Yeah, and it's this is an area of preparedness that I think a lot of people are just not really considering, of how huge it's going to be. And I think most people who are preppers, we tend to think of ourselves as we're very independent, we're very self-sufficient people, right? We're, there's part of us that has that mentality of like, I don't need help, right? And that may be true, like you said, at the moment, but you start going through a few bad incidents and you really don't know how your body and your mind is going to react to that. And so you said different people are going to react differently. And I want to try to explain this as best as I can through a video and not take up the entire video with this part. But you can have, for example, I could have 10 firefighters go to an incident, right? And something really bad happens in that incident. Let's say that a child dies, okay, in a burning building or something like that. Very, very traumatic thing. In fact, child fatalities is one of the biggest traumas that somebody can experience. So all these 10 firefighters are there. They respond. They're all involved in certain ways. And maybe 9 of them walk away from it and they're like, yeah, that was awful. It really was terrible. But they're functioning. They're not getting nightmares. They're not getting flashbacks, things like that. And that one other person does, right? Or maybe it's the ratio is different. Maybe 9 of them have that reaction and 1 doesn't, right? A lot of that stuff has to do with what we bring to the table on any given day, right? So we all have our baggage, our emotional baggage, and life experiences up to the point of your trauma are going to play a huge role in how you deal with the trauma in the aftermath. That's one factor. It's not the only factor, but it's an important factor. So, for example, in that fire situation that I said, and you could substitute fire for whatever emergency you want, whether tornadoes that wreck a trailer park, whatever. If I've had, for example, maybe I had a younger brother that died, right? I'm just making something up. And when I was very young, I witnessed that, right? My susceptibility to that child fatality is probably going to be, for risk for after symptoms, is probably going to be a lot higher than somebody who didn't have that kind of experience. Does that make sense? Did I explain it okay?
Mm-hmm. That's perfect.
Okay. And then the other factor is not so much even the trauma itself, but how we think about the trauma afterwards can do a lot of play into how much it's affecting us down the road, right? So let's take those 10 firefighters again as an example, and 9 of those firefighters walk away from it saying, you know what, this was a terrible incident. What a horrible thing to happen to this family, but we did the best we could. And then that one other firefighter is saying, I wish we had done this differently. That's a huge factor in how it affects you later on down the road. And the more that inner dialogue starts to play, like, what if, I wish I had, like all those kind of things.
Yeah.
It was my fault, right? Like it can be even more catastrophic, right? Like if I had turned left instead of going straight, we could have got there 3 seconds sooner, all those kind of things play at somebody's mind after an incident. And that can be the deciding factor why that one person all of a sudden is now developing some pretty severe trauma symptoms. Because when they're going to bed, when we go to sleep, one of the things that happens is our subconscious and our unconscious takes the material from our day and it tries to sort it and it tries to make sense of it and it tries to get to what we call adaptive resolution. Mm-hmm. So when it gets to adaptive resolution, that means it's going to file it away, and you may remember this horrible incident that happened, but you're probably going to be okay. If it doesn't get to adaptive resolution, if it doesn't get to the point where it's not playing the what if game, then you're going to have that nightmare, and it's going to keep happening, and it's going to keep happening, and it's going to keep happening because your brain's going to keep trying to make that work, and you're fighting it with your dialogue. And it can become playing out in your daytime and flashbacks and things like that. And there's other things that can trigger flashbacks, like sounds and smells, because of the way your brain sorts stuff. So I always explain to my patients, the brain likes to sort things in certain ways. And 2 ways that the brain is very, very efficient at sorting things is, how did it make you feel personally? And another way is by your senses, and smell is a big one. Smell is a big one. So if people who've smelled a dead body, they will tell you they'll never forget that smell, right? And so even smelling anything similar to that, like roadkill or something like that, can trigger a burned body. Somebody who's smelled a burned body, they will remember that for the rest of their life. It's a very strong memory, and anything that smells similar to that could trigger that.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. There's nothing like a burned body. The only thing I've had close was we had a guy that was on chemotherapy that we transported from San Francisco down to Carmel Community, and he had a bowel movement, and honest to God, we could not get that smell out of the ambulance for 3 weeks afterwards. It was just unbelievable. And but now, so let me take this another step. Those 9 who were able to sort through that and say, okay, we're going to go back to work. Everything's fine. There's still underlying, there's something that at some point in the future could cause them to react, the trigger effect, to that based off of this one experience, either positively or negatively. And just because they reacted positively this time does not necessarily guarantee that they're going to react positively to it the second time. Am I?
Yeah. Are you speaking to flashbacks or like dealing with similar incidents?
Yes, to both.
Both. So flashbacks are a type of dissociation, and I don't mind sharing this. I've had a flashback, so I can speak to my experience with it. It doesn't mean that everybody's is going to be the same. They can be very, very intense and immersive, or they can be mild enough that the person knows what's happening and is can kind of talk themselves out of it. And if you understand what I mean. And then there's other types of dissociative reactions, such as most people, in my experience, have at some point they'll have minor dissociative reactions, which is like, so if you've ever talked to somebody and they just kind of blank out for a second like that, that's a little bit of a dissociative reaction. If you've ever driven and all of a sudden you're like, did I miss my turn? Right? You had a little bit of a dissociative reaction. It's nothing to panic about. Everybody gets them from time to time. You know, our brain is very complex and is processing all kinds of different levels of consciousness simultaneously, believe it or not. Like, we're all aware of, you know, the stuff that's right in front of us, our working memory, but there's processes that are happening simultaneously. Like, you may be thinking about the stream that you're listening to right now if you're in the audience, but you're also thinking about, when do I have to get diapers? How much are eggs going to be this week? How are you going to pay your light bill? All that stuff is still processing somewhere in your brain. It's just not at the front right now.
Yeah, I'm having a problem focusing purely on prayer. I find myself waning off when I'm praying and thinking of other things. I said, no, that's wrong. I need to focus on this, not that. But anyhow, let's say that the SHTF happens and we're walking around, and we can look and we can see that there's probably 3 to 4 or 5 major categories of people. There's going to be one person who's going to be manic in a sense of how they're reacting to this, saying this couldn't be or whatever. A second person is going to be in a state of shock where they're just frozen, and their body, their mind has shut down. It's refusing to accept the new reality that's going on around them, for lack of a better. This is my pure layman's terms. So, and I'm going to use those 2 as examples. And there's probably a very long list of, you know, going from mental shutdown to mental hyperactivity. That there's this continuum, that there's going to be all kinds of people along all different points of that continuum. How do we deal with that? How do we go over and effectively assist them during that time, and take both of those models or whatever's in between?
Yeah. So, like with any other first aid, number one, you need to make sure the scene is safe for you, right? Like, because if you're not safe, you're not going to be able to help anybody else. And then if you're talking about, like, you've got multiple people having multiple reactions to something that just went down, right? So let's say an explosion happened. Okay, we'll just make something up. And like you sometimes will see in movies, you're going to have some people walking around dazed and things like that, and not really fully cognizant. Maybe if you've ever helped somebody out in a car accident, you might have even seen that. You may see somebody, what I would say is like amped up, like that adrenaline has just shot through their body. Give them some space, because you don't know what their reaction could be, right? Like, start talking to them. Don't just come right up and say, hey, you okay? Can I do some first aid on you? You know, I would say, hey, you know, talk to them from a little bit of a distance, because you just don't know what's going on in their mind at that moment. But you're also going to have to do a little bit of triage, right? Like, so who's in most need of help right now, and who's going to be in danger if you don't get them squared away, right? So if somebody was just kind of in a daze, right, just to take that, for example, they're kind of shocked and they're not really seem to be processing what's happening, you could probably approach that person and talk to them as you're approaching. You want to start asking them very, very simple questions like, what's your name, right? And that may take them a few seconds, depending on what's happened, to answer, right? Start getting them thinking in very, very basic, logical steps. Like, do you see that shady area over there? Could you go sit there for me? I'll come back and check on you in 10 minutes, right? And if somebody is really, really confused, I might start asking them questions like, do you know what day it is, right? And try to get them reoriented. What were you doing right before this happened? Do you know who the current president of the United States is? That's going to give me a little bit of information about how much cognitive presence there is right now. So then I can ask, what's your name? So we do date, time. Where do you know where you are right now? Do you know where you are right now? What's your name? Is there anybody here that's with you? Was there anybody here when this happened? Do you have somebody that you can call if phones are working, right? If I want to really assess that a little bit further, I might start saying like, who were the last 4 presidents, right? What was the last movie you saw, right? So you're starting to engage the higher brain a little bit more at that point, and that can help to get somebody out of it. And then I might go into like relaxation breathing with people, because when we do relaxation, and I'll show people how to do that right now. When we do relaxation breathing, we're sending signals to the amygdala and the parasympathetic nervous system to start to calm down, right? So the amygdala is part of your brainstem, and it controls your fight, flight, freeze response. It's, what activates when something big emergency happens, and it makes you faster, stronger, more resilient to pain. Your brain processing power gets sped up really fast. So if you ever had something appear like it's happening in slow motion during an emergency, that's what's happening. It's not going in slow motion. Your brain is going on like hyperdrive, so it's processing information much faster, and it appears as slow motion. Yeah. So to do the deep breathing, I might start with saying, okay, I want you to breathe in through your nose, real, real slow. And notice that your belly rises as you do that. And then you're going to exhale through your mouth, real, real slow. And now you're going to pause at the bottom, and I want you to wait a second. And now you're going to breathe in through your nose again. And I'll do that with them a few times. And then once they've got it, I'll say, I want you to do 5 more of those or 10 more of those, right? And that will start to immediately get the adrenaline to start to cool down a little bit. Their brain's going to come closer back to baseline. You're going to be able to start getting some more higher cognitive stuff going with them. And that works great for panic attacks. It works great for if somebody just had a nightmare. It works great for if somebody is frozen. You can just say, okay, we're just going to focus on our breathing right now. Just follow me, right? Watch me. Watch how I breathe. Do it with me now, right? It's a really basic thing that people can grasp onto, even when you're a little sidebar here. So I've heard that when your body goes into like hypothermia, one of the things that happens is your thoughts get really, really primitive, right? And I've heard from people who are climbers that when they get to that low oxygen level, your thoughts start getting really, really primitive. And there's the same kind of thing that happens after a big incident, that your higher cognitive processes get temporarily impaired. And so we want to kind of get them back into being able to use that, but we got to start with some small stuff, get them reoriented to like, what the heck just happened?
Kind of like a reboot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So breathing is a good one for everybody to learn how to do that slow relaxation breathing, and asking the questions of really basic stuff, get them oriented to where they are, and then maybe give them some simple directions. Like, I want you to go over there, sip a little bit of water, And when I can get back to you, I'll come back to you and check in on you again. By the time you get back to them, they're probably going to be coming back around.
What about touching?
What about what?
Touching the person?
Depends on the person.
Yeah.
It depends on the person.
Is there a way to judge that ahead of time, whether that'll be positive or negative?
Yeah. If you know the person and you know that they're okay with it, it might be okay. But if it's a stranger, you really, at minimum, I would ask permission, just like with when you render first aid, ask permission. Because you don't know, some people you don't know what they're bringing to the table. I don't particularly like to be touched. And because of my martial arts background, like I might have a reaction to it too, which, so you just never know.
Gotcha. Now, let's take those great points and refocus them back on ourselves. So now we have gone through that explosion. Let's use that example again. And we look around us and we see other people as if we're in a movie. And that's a big movie screen out there, and we're here. And now all of a sudden we realize that it's in slow motion, that we realize that the sounds are muted, that the smell, there is no sense of smell right now, that things have kind of gone haywire. How do we start, number one, self-diagnosing, and number two, self-treating?
Well, again, first thing, make sure the scene's still safe. If not, you got to get off that X. You got to get out of there. If the scene is safe and you're going to start doing a little body scan, what kind of injuries do I have here? I would even check the ears and the nose. Do I have blood coming out of me? That kind of stuff. Stand slowly when you start to get up, because if you've been concussed in any way, that can be very dangerous. If you're worried about hearing, you can kind of do rub your fingers together on each ear. Is there any damage there? And then once you're, that you're physically okay, you can start doing where am I? What happened? Who was with me? What did I see? And if you're clear on all that, you can maybe look around and see who else can I help. If you're amped up and your heart's pounding and stuff like that, you probably need to do a couple breaths yourself before you start rendering aid to anybody else.
Yeah, if you do it too quickly, then you're not going to be that effective. You're going to have to get yourself reset in order to be effective to anybody else.
Yeah, and one of the things we talked about, all the positives that happen when your amygdala fires off, but there's a lot of negatives too. You resort to your training, basically. So if you haven't trained, so you're going to resort to your training, and your finite motor skills get a little bit shot, right? So this is why those of you who train with firearms, there's different things you can do to train how to do that when your finite motor skills are shot, because you may find that all of a sudden just changing the magazine is going to be way harder than you realized it was. So how do you train for that? You can run a mile, do some push-ups, and then hit the range as your heart is still kind of jacked up, and then practice your magazine changes and things like that.
So that, I think you've transitioned over to the last area I really wanted to talk about, and that is,
okay,
what can we do now to strengthen our mind in preparation for what we know could be a cataclysmic event?
Yeah. Practicing the daily relaxation breathing is a huge one. Meditation, learning how to thought stop would be my next one. And it's a hard one to get. I'll explain it, but it does take some work. For people who've never done this, it's going to feel a little challenging, and it may feel like this isn't working for a while, but you got to stick with it. It's kind of like learning a new skill. It's going to be sloppy for a while until you get it good. But thought stopping, how to do it. So I talked about this a little bit last night, where if you recognize that you are prone to thinking things in a catastrophic way, or you're very negative in your thinking, that could be a liability down the road, right? So you have to say, okay, it's not good for me to think like this. I got to basically shut that thought off. Well, if you're one of those people who's very anxiety prone and has racing thoughts, and thoughts are spinning through your head all day long, it's going to take you a lot more work, but you still can learn how to do this. So one exercise I tell people to do, and you can do this when you're meditating, or if you're praying, or if you're laying in bed at night and your mind is kind of racing a little bit, do your breathing. Start with your breathing, and then picture like you can be in any environment that you like, that you feel comfortable with. And then just let those thoughts start to come to you. Picture them as a bubble. And with your mind, you're gently like tapping them away. You're just tapping them away, and watch them with your mind, watch them float away. And if you've never done this before, the thoughts are going to come back. That's normal. Just understand that. Keep practicing. And you're going to feel like this is bogus. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Keep practicing, because eventually, every time you're tapping it away, you're teaching your brain to stop it, put it away. We'll deal with this later on. And it can expand into other areas of your life. It's not just emergency first aid. Like, that's good mental health care anyways. It's something to be working on now for everybody, because I think in general, we have this tendency, you and I were talking about depression off screen, right? We have this tendency where sometimes the world seems so dystopian, and technology is as much good has come from technology, an equal amount of not good has come from technology, where in many ways, kids don't play outside as much as they used to, and things like that, which is not good, right? So we get prone to throughout our life, these negative thinking patterns that are associated with life experiences. And I may say, I'm fat, I'm stupid, I'm ugly, I'm unlovable, I'm a failure, right? Like all these negative thoughts that we can say to ourselves. And the more you say it, and some people say it all day long, right? Like some people do that all day long. The more you say it, you're feeding your brain the wrong food, right? So every thought, this is if people don't take away any other concept from tonight, this is the concept I want you to get. Every thought that you have is an electrical chemical response in your brain. So if I was to say to you, Lee, what's your favorite food? What do you like to eat?
Hot and sour soup.
Hot and sour soup. Who makes the best hot and sour soup?
Chewy's.
Who?
Chewy's.
Chewy's? Is it a restaurant?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to send you a gift certificate for $500 for Chewy's.
Oh, great.
How does that make you feel?
Fantastic.
And that's how quick it was, right? Like I can see you're actually smiling a little bit, right? All I did was I introduced a happy thought for you into your brain, and your brain immediately starts producing dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, oxytocin, endorphins. All these like happy chemicals start happening, and it's quick. It's like really, really quick. But if I was to say something awful to you, like, Lee, I never liked you. You've been a jerk. You're always going to be a jerk. Like, that's going to make you feel a certain way too, right?
Well, I have a confession to make. I am a recovering asshole. And it takes very hard work not to slip back into it. So the fact that you're seeing the real me impresses me a whole bunch, because now I know you really know your stuff.
Yeah. So it's hard for me to imagine that about you. It really is. But that's the concept that I want people to get for their own mental health care, as you're consider it part of your preps, that like manage your own mental health in a way where you're being kind to yourself, right? So if you're prone to this, if you think negative thoughts all the time, just catch it, start to be aware of it, and start to say, okay, I recognize that that's putting bad stuff in my brain. And when we do that, that's a neutral reframe, which I'll take, because it's not easy to always be positive. So I'll take a neutral reframe. And when we do that, we're already changing the chemistry in the brain. And when we change the chemistry in the brain, our feelings will change and our behaviors will change to follow, right? So before we went live, somebody in chat was talking to me about smoking cigarettes and that kind of thing, right? So for that person and anybody who smokes, if they're thinking about quitting, as I would say, the first thing is you need to do is start telling yourself, I'm not a smoker anymore. Even if you are, start telling yourself, I'm not a smoker anymore, because you're already starting to put that thought into your brain, and there is a chemical reaction that goes along with it. You're still going to go through withdrawals, I promise you, but you're making it a little bit more likely that you're going to be successful in your attempt to quit. So I'm not a smoker anymore. I can do this. I can quit. I can make it through withdrawals. I can find substitutes for smoking to help me deal with anxiety, right? All of those are, affirmations, and do that stuff with yourself. It sounds corny. It sounds like, some whatever you want to say, hogwash or whatever, it sounds corny, but there's a science to it, and it really does work. It's about, what you're feeding your brain, and that has a huge outcome on your whole life, really.
So from a layman's perspective, I started smoking in basic training when I was 19 years old, and I quit when I was 62, 63. And I quit because I was on an I was intubated oxygen in an ICU with MRSA pneumonia for a while.
Yeah.
And cigarettes and oxygen just don't go together too well.
Right.
But there's this beautiful 650-acre ranch for sale about an hour up the road. And it's got a 34-acre pond with a flowing stream through it. And they've got it stocked with bass and catfish and bluegill. Just beautiful piece of property. I could probably pay cash for that property with all the money I wasted on stop smoking books, hypnosis, lozenges, prescriptions, and everything else. If I had come to the conclusion that it's what I really wanted to do, I could have done it without all these things that I spent money on.
Yeah.
But
mindset is huge. It's huge. It is the biggest factor. Now, there are other factors. I'm not going to say that, if everybody could just learn to think happy thoughts, that the world would be fantastic. It would help a lot, but it's not the only thing. Of course, people are born into horrible situations. There's people being born right now, and human slavery is still going on in the world, and things like that. So, like, I can't realistically say, well, if that person just thought happy thoughts, that their life would be better. It's not that simple. But for most of us who are, if you're living an okay life and you've got a safe space to live, and you've got enough money coming in that you can feed yourself, this absolutely can help you.
I think the one thing that we can say about military service, if you've been in the military and you had an overseas assignment, and I don't care where that overseas assignment is, U.S. looks wonderful once you come back from somewhere else.
I believe that.
So there's this perspective that we've created of where we are, and we don't know the reality of the 95% of the rest of the earth.
Yeah.
And once we discover the reality of the rest of the earth, we say, we don't have it that bad.
Yeah.
Even the worst people here have it better than most of the best people elsewhere. And so the mind
than most of the world, really.
Yeah.
Gratitude is a big part of it too. Gratitude will carry you through some pretty tough times. I talked about that on my stream last night too, where we had a Biggs prep on my channel last night, and talked about how gratitude got me through one of my darkest moments when I was having a life-saving surgery and was in unimaginable pain and was having a little pity party, and was laying there in the hospital. Oh, poor me. Why me? Why did this happen to me? And what got me out of that was realizing that somewhere in that hospital there was probably a little kid who was fighting cancer. So basically told myself, shut up, Sarge. You got nothing to complain about. Even if I died that day, I had lived a very good, full life. Got nothing to complain about.
And we were talking about Man's Search for Meaning just before the live in the back room as well, by Viktor Frankl. And some of the things that he esoterically thought about. So he wrote Man's Search for Meaning, and basically describing his how he, everything was relative, even while he was in Auschwitz. And so kind of his what would you call it, mental relativism, I guess. Is that a safe assumption to say that?
I know. Well, I'm not sure what terminology he used, but he was a psychiatrist.
But I mean, his whole thing is, that piece of bread that he hid in his bed for the next day, and everything that he did to try to survive, and some of the things that he thought about. So between him and Abraham Maslow, I mean, those two guys, a lot of the theories that they came up with that become basically what you're doing, or the groundwork for what you're doing. Most of our modern dealing with emotional pain and everything is relative, and it's relative to what they experienced there in the concentration camps.
Yeah, and we know there are people who live in extreme poverty that are very happy, right? I've met some. I've worked with people from other parts of the world that have told me like they've come from areas where there was no electricity, there was no television or anything like that, and they were happy,
Yeah.
So we tend to attribute so much of our stress here in the United States to our physical problems and materialistic problems, but there's really so much more to it than that.
Yeah, my wife and daughter are so thankful I'm not on Facebook anymore.
Yeah.
They said it was a total stressor for me, just unbelievable.
I struggle with that too. I get caught up in political stuff and can get pretty fired up about that stuff. In fact, people who follow me on Twitter, you will see the more political side of Sarge there, and I get aggravated with stuff, but we probably shouldn't let that control our lives too much. Like in the grand scheme of things, I need to be active, I need to vote and that kind of stuff, but I also need to be worried about my own household, neighborhood, and community.
So we've got support for being overseas and coming back. How great it is, from both Hoosier prepping nurse, and from Lori's kitchen. Lori went to the mountains of Guatemala, and she says that's so happy when she got home. And let me look up here. It was Hoosier prepping nurse, and she says that she was never so glad to come back from South Korea. And I mean, and South Korea really is a second world country and up and coming first world country. So to think that there is that much of a difference between there and here, but there is. It's just social. The foods that you're used to eating that aren't there. I was telling my wife tonight, we went to Whataburger, so I got my favorite, a large vanilla milkshake.
Nice.
And we were talking about the fact that when I was working on my master's at Fort Huachuca, I'd stop by Burger King all the time and eat a burger at Burger King before I went to class. And there's Burger King has a contract. It's on every military base that there is in the world, and that's the one piece of continuity that a soldier has when they're stationed overseas. Is there's probably a Burger King somewhere close by. Is it a great burger? Absolutely not. But it is.
It's familiar.
Right? It is something that gives you a little bit closer touch to being back home. So what else can we do to prepare ourselves? Are there any mental exercises we can do? Can we do a bunch of what ifs in preparation for it, or is that constructive or destructive?
Well, I want to talk about medication. I want to talk a little bit about there's the ADD. We'll come back to the medication piece in a second, but I want to talk about flashbacks and how to help somebody if they're experiencing that. Okay. Because I do think if things get bad and we start having, collapse kind of stuff, or like long-term SHTF stuff, everybody's going to be seeing a lot of this, right? So with flashbacks, there's a technique that I would like to teach people, and you can use this if it ever happens for you, or you can use it for if you see somebody else experiencing it, or a loved one that's experienced it. There's no reason why you can't teach them this. You don't have to have a license in clinical psychology or anything like that to do this. It's just basic mental health first aid. But what I would have them do is, or if you're prone to flashbacks yourself, you could try this. So as soon as you start to notice it's happening, as soon as you catch it happening, there's a part of you. And again, remember I said that I know what a flashback is. I've had them. as soon as you know, there's a part of you that's going to want to follow that because you're like, what's happening? There's a curiosity piece to it, but you really need to try not to engage and follow that movie. Like it's, like the movie in front of you. Pull out of it. You can look at it later when you're in control. Don't let the flashback be in control of you, right? So start looking around wherever you are, and I want you to notice 5 things that you see, okay, in your physical proximity. 5 things that you see, and then 4 things that you hear, and then 3 things that you feel. And by feel, I mean physically feel, not emotionally feel, right? You like my made up signs. 3 things that you feel, 2 things that you smell, 1 thing that you taste. And if you can't come up with something, just keep going. Go to the next one. Don't worry about it. What that does is that sensory grounding pulls you back to the present.
Wow.
And then the next thing, if you're still feeling like a little bit shaky or out of it, start going through that stuff we were saying before. What's today's date? Where am I? How did I get here? Who's the current president? What was the last movie I saw? What was the last book I read? That should get you out of it.
Well, I don't know. Maybe this is just my unique idiosyncrasy, my unique insanity. I don't know if other people have it as well. But one of the bad things about having the same confessor is, Father High got to the point to where I was confessing the same thing over and over and over again. And he finally he finally said through the screen, he says, Lee, God has forgiven you. It's time for you to forgive yourself. So how common is that people have a hard time forgiving themselves for something that they may have done that hurt somebody else or
it's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. That's probably one of the biggest reasons why people are going to get nightmares and things like that. Self-forgiveness is a very, very difficult thing to do. It starts with recognizing that we can't go back and change the past, right? And if it's bothering you, you're genuinely feel bad about it. If it's somebody that you hurt or something like that, if you're able to take accountability with them, that's a good thing to do. If you can't because they're no longer here, then do it to the best of your ability in spirit and in prayer and in your mind. Take accountability to them. You can say it out loud if nobody's around and you feel comfortable with that. There's something about saying things too that has a very strong impact on our brain as well, right? So let's say, so I don't know, like most men, I got into a lot of fights in adolescence, right? And let's say that was, I'll take something small like that. And let's say that I felt bad about that and it was bothering me. And I wish that I hadn't gotten to this fight with so-and-so. Well, I could start by recognizing, okay, shoot, there's nothing I can do about that. That was 30 years ago. I'm very sorry. If he's still alive, I can call him and say, I'm very sorry. If he's not, then maybe I'm just going to say that in my prayer, in my thoughts. Maybe I'm going to say it out loud when I'm in the shower or whatever. I'm very sorry. I wish that this incident hadn't happened between us. I wish that it hadn't. I'm so sorry that I inflicted any pain on you, right? And then we vow to try to do better, right? And then we have to spiritually, visually, emotionally try to let it go. And I know it sounds like I'm describing it as if it's easy. I recognize all of that's not easy. I recognize.
Yeah.
But just like with the thought stopping, keep working on it because you're teaching your brain to think about it differently. Honestly, this is just an example. If I got into a fight with somebody in high school, what good am I doing anybody by beating myself up for the next 40 years?
Right.
I'm wasting energy that I could be using to help people instead, right?
Well, I think mine's a repetitive thing. I was extra. My dad was a high school dropout to fight in World War II, and so of course and they were always happy of my accomplishments in education and everything else. And so, but I had a hard time. I beat up on Dad quite a bit about his grammar and things like that. And gosh, anyhow, that's a totally different story. Sometimes we do things, and so how is that going to impact us in the future? I think is what we need to focus on. And
talk to your dad in prayer. You
Yeah.
know, talk to your dad in prayer, and recognize that like our life experiences also can be used to do a lot of good. Even the bad stuff can be used to do good, right? So maybe part of what happened there is there's somebody else that's watching this stream right now, and they're like, you know what, I'm kind of mean to my dad or something,
Yeah.
and now because you said that, they're gonna work on it, right? So that was really
But what I
helpful.
notice is it's generational, and what goes around comes around. So my daughter is now to me what I was to my dad.
Mhm.
And I think that's just the way we are structured as human beings as we're going through this opposite Hegelian dialectic, the increasing level of knowledge and awareness and everything. But um, anyhow, um, as we go into this, whether it be, I saw somebody saying that the thing they're most afraid of right now is WEF. Okay, so here it is. That the currency destruction, um, and it's going to be rolled out in the next few years. And they're concerned about that. So if we get into a Great Depression, then how do we mentally adjust to that? But I'm going to say, Dragon Slayer, I agree with you, but I disagree with you. I think that our nonsensical spending with our government and almost $8 trillion in debt, that there's no way on earth we can pay back in our lifetimes, even if we tax the super rich at 100%. We are going to be. I think we've already defined the destruction of our economy, and we've done that to ourselves, not the WEF doing it to us. But and that the number one reason we have inflation is because there's too much money out there vis-a-vis the amount of consumables. And so when you have more money than you do products to buy, then people start offering more money for that product, and that's what causes the price of it to go up.
Mhm.
And so okay, let's take that and roll with it. Okay, so now we know that the currency is going to fall. We're already in a recession. We're in for a depression. How do we deal with that emotionally? They're prepping with Sarge.
Yeah, I think the we're not going to be as resilient as our grandparents and great grandparents. That's for sure. We are really, really addicted to and dependent on technology and creature comforts, and just watch when exactly, and I'm sitting here playing with my flashlight and all these, uh, just watch what happens when the power goes out in a city for 3 days. Okay. And go on social media and start monitoring like the chat in that area, go on some of the Facebook groups for that area, and people will be flipping out because they can't get their favorite fast food, their favorite takeout, right? Like that's going to be the least of our problems. So you're going to have a lot of angry people. You're going to have a lot. Unfortunately, I think that self-harm, if you know what I mean, there's a certain word here I don't want to use because YouTube doesn't like it, but if I say self-harm, I think everybody knows what I'm talking about.
Let me let the Chihuahua out real quick. This is the one who normally does not want to go out.
No problem. Yeah, so I think self-harm would skyrocket, which right now, unfortunately, it already is. So you'd have a lot of depression, and I don't know how much it would match something like the Book of Eli or The Road, but you know how depressing the themes are in movies like that. I mean, I think that in terms of that type of realism, that's probably accurate. That there'd be a lot of people suffering, and self-harm went up really high during the Great Depression, and that generation was a lot more resilient than we are.
Yeah.
You know.
So Manny, let me tell you that I was chaplain for a group of veterans, and one of the things that's a very common thing, is especially when somebody comes back from combat. In my opinion, and this is my personal opinion, anybody who takes another person's life at that point in time experiences insanity. It's not natural to take a life. And so you have to put yourself into a temporary state of insanity in order to do it.
Yeah.
For some people, they can come out of that, and for some people, they stay in it. And unfortunately, this book was taken out of the Protestant Bible, but for 250 years, the Greeks occupied Israel. And so they only allowed things to be written in Greek. So there's 250 years, there's 6 books of the Old Testament that are written in Greek. And this was, if you don't have those, you have 250 years of missing Israeli history. And but two of those actually are the book of Maccabees. And in the book of Maccabees, during the revolt of Judas Maccabeus, one of the things they realized was when they went in and killed somebody, they had to go through a ritualistic self-purification for 7 days before they could be returned back into society. And so the rabbis and the warriors would go through a ritualistic mental, emotional, spiritual healing from what they had to do. Now, this was pretty bad back then. This was face to face. You got to be within arm's reach of the other person when you're doing what you're doing to them.
Yeah.
And so that's something I think that we have missed in our modern combat is we don't take care of our soldiers with the mental, emotional trauma that takes place when you actually pull the trigger. And I think we need to come to grips with that. That's so your friend is beating himself up, in my opinion, for something that's real, and we just have not yet, as a society, come with an effective way of treating that to the extent that it needs to be treated.
Yeah.
And in your opinion, Prepping with Sarge?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to it a little bit. Once again, for if people tuning in late, I am not a veteran. Sarge is just a nickname. I've worked with a lot of veterans in therapy, and so I've heard some of the horrible things that you all have had to experience. And I know that I got to be careful about how I say this. I know that there's sometimes an invalidation that happens because you may have been asked to do something that was necessary, or ordered to do something that was necessary, and then told that you can never talk about that. And I know that causes a lot of internal warfare for the person that's been in that situation. Just a couple thoughts on that. So I know, I want you to know that there are people in the community who love you and appreciate you and appreciate that you sacrificed a part of yourself to keep America safe and to keep the war off of us, off of the homeland. Okay. So that's number one. And number two, there is help available. Treatment has gotten, Lee and I were talking about this before we went live. Treatment has gotten progressively better since I've been in the field for over 25 years. I'm amazed at how much better it's gotten. Things that we can do now that weren't even thought of 25 years ago. So, for example, EMDR therapy. If you're a veteran, I would really, and you're struggling with symptoms, I would really strongly encourage you to look up what EMDR therapy, and it's literally the letters EMDR. I could talk about it, but it'll probably take up the majority of our stream if I do this now. We could talk about it another time if you want to bring me back.
Sure.
That, in my opinion, like I just got trained in that this 2022. And already from what I'm seeing from EMDR therapy, I'm getting better results in 3 months than I would have gotten in 3 years of traditional therapy. So therapy has gotten much, much better. The medications are much, much better and less side effects than they were even 10 years ago. So there's good options out there. You don't have to struggle with it alone. Please don't struggle with it alone. As a therapist, we're sworn to confidentiality. There's only a few exceptions to that. Like if somebody told us that they were, there was a child being abused or something like that, we're obligated to do something about that. But for the most part, things are confidential. I've heard stories that I cannot share with anybody. So things that people don't like talking about. Some of you know what I'm talking about, right? I don't want to get into specifics here. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Don't suffer it alone. Please don't. get the help. And EMDR is one. There's a couple other ones. There's cognitive processing therapy, which is very, very good for trauma as well. Trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
There's prolonged exposure therapy. There's like 10 different ways we can treat trauma, you know. And if something doesn't work for you, like you went to a therapist and you felt like I didn't get what I needed, go to another therapist, ask for a change, you know. Don't be afraid to do that.
So ungrateful peasant, from what I understand, the Native American rituals are very close to the Judas Maccabeus rituals. And there's a lot of similarity between the two. And I place a lot of credence in that.
And somebody mentioned the psilocybin therapy. Manny did so psychedelics and things like that. So just to reiterate, my opinions are my own, not necessarily representative of other people who work in my field. I have never worked in one of those clinics, but I can tell you that the research that I've read about them is very promising. I would encourage people to not necessarily think that microdosing is the same thing as, say, going to an ayahuasca ceremony or something like that, right? That's much, much more intense. And I've only seen videos of them. I don't know. I can't speak to it. I've never participated in anything like that. But microdosing is showing a lot of promise in terms of helping people to kind of reset some of those thoughts that occurred with and some of that internal warfare that we do that is a big factor with the after effects of trauma and the struggles that happen after the trauma. So yeah, do your own research on it. I've never participated in anything like that. The places that I've worked have never done that, but the research that I've read is very promising.
Just one real quick one here before we go, because it's 9:00, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
But Manny, I would advise against that. And this, I'm going to give it to you from a personal point of view. People from my generation, the Vietnam era, self-medicated with alcohol and with narcotics. And when I was the HR director for the homeless shelter, we did what we called a PIT survey. So it was a point in time survey. We would go out and survey all of the homeless here in the greater Austin area. And 80% of the homeless were self-medicating with either alcohol or narcotics. I caught myself just in time. I was treating myself with alcohol, and I found somebody who was more dependent upon it as an escape than I was. And I said, you know what? If I don't stop this now, I'm going to be like that in the very near future. And this person couldn't make it through the day without at least a half a bottle, if not a bottle. And unfortunately, alcohol and drugs are the way that most people tend to self-medicate, to escape. I think they look for an escape. But you know what? What I found out was using alcohol as an escape actually concentrated the memories rather than made me escape them. And that made me want alcohol even more, because you wanted more of the release, and yet you kept getting more of the enslavement. And that's just my personal experience. You can take that for what it's worth.
Yes, I mean, and not just alcohol, even marijuana and even some of the prescription drugs. Unfortunately, really all it does is it's just blunting it. It's not helping you heal. It's blunting the symptom, right? And so maybe a good metaphor would be, if I have a headache, it's not a deficiency of aspirin, right? It's, the aspirin will blunt the headache maybe,
right?
But it's not. It doesn't solve what the underlying issue was, right? So, which could be stress, it could be dehydration, lack of caffeine, whatever. There's all kinds of different things that could be causing it. But all the aspirin or ibuprofen is going to do is just blunt the symptom. It's not fixing the symptom. And unfortunately, alcohol is like that, and pain medications, unfortunately, are like that. Benzodiazepines, unfortunately, are like that. Again, my opinions are my own. I'm not necessarily speaking for the entire mental health community. I'm just giving you my thoughts based on my
Yeah,
experience.
and I'm not speaking for the entire military either. That my experiences were my own, and my devils were my devils. Somebody mentioned that earlier about the devil and grabbing a hold of us, and the thought process that I have, and the little reminder I have here on my desk is the devil can only hook you if you're nibbling at his bait, and so you have to go there and nibble on the hook in order for him to catch you. And if you don't nibble on the hook, he can't catch you. So the best thing for me to do is avoid the nibbles, if that makes sense. Um, I can understand where those can go into extremes.
Yeah.
One more question, if you've got it, and for Sarge, and I think we're going to call it a night. So let everybody have their Saturday evening, and I can finish up my great vanilla milkshake. Whataburger has, in my opinion, one of the best commercially available milkshakes on the market.
Yeah. Well, since we're talking about vices like that, I'm going to put in a plug for McDonald's Shamrock Shake, which is going to be coming around again in March. That is my jam, man. It
really?
is. Oh, if you've never had one, you got to try one, man. It's so good.
I spent 3 months in Malaysia, and God, and I'm addicted to milkshakes and ice cream.
Well, if you have a Shamrock Shake, it's going to change your world.
So Dell sent me straight from Penang, Malaysia, up to Tokyo, Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to Tokyo, Japan, and Vice President Asia Pacific was there, Vice President of Human Resources, and she took me out. I happened to be in Tokyo for my birthday. Well, actually, I left. I spent the night in Singapore. So I spent the first part of my birthday in Singapore, which is their National Independence Day. Mm-hmm. So I got to see the flyover over the Padang and everything like that. 12-hour flight up to Tokyo. Got to Tokyo. It was still my birthday. It took me out to the Ginza, and so the Hard Rock Cafe, and went there and for my birthday party. And then we were walking down the Ginza, and I saw that they had a Wendy's. And I said, I've got to get a chocolate. What do they call them at Wendy's? Anyhow, their chocolate shake.
Yeah.
I said, I got to get one. It was a little bitty 6-ounce chocolate milkshake. And it was Monopoly money, And I went back to the hotel and started figuring my expenses. I paid $25 for a 6-ounce chocolate milkshake in Tokyo. Wow. I go, whoa. So anyhow.
Did it taste that good?
Frosty. Thank you, Prepping by Faith. Yeah, chocolate frosty. Yeah. Yes, it tasted it. It was worth everything.
It was worth it. Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. So
can I touch on the medications? Do we have a couple more minutes?
Sure. Oh yeah, you can have a half hour. I'm happy to. I'd stay here as long as you want.
So I did see your question about alternatives to medications. Again, just a reminder for anybody tuning in. My opinions are my own. I'm not necessarily speaking for the entirety of mental health clinicians or the field in general, but I'm happy to give you my opinions. So when we started the stream and we were talking about the more severe and persistent diagnoses like schizophrenia, schizoaffective, things like that are medication is very, very crucial to their safety. If you have a loved one who is in that boat, I would strongly encourage you to be thinking about talking to the doctor about having a backup supply. Now, you're only going to be able to do so much with that. But if you could have a 3-month backup supply, that's going to get you through most situations. Not all, but most situations, right? So, because there's certain, like schizophrenia, there's really not a good natural alternative that's as effective as the medications that we have for schizophrenia. I'm sorry. I wish there was. Again, my opinions, somebody out there is going to say, no, that's not true, whatever. I've been in the field for 25 years. I know people who've tried all the alternatives, everything from marijuana to whatever. Marijuana may have a lot of medicinal benefits for sleep and anxiety. It does not cure all, unfortunately, right? Mm-hmm. So, and in fact, with schizophrenia, there's a lot of research that says it actually makes it worse with schizophrenia and schizoaffective and things like that. So,
well, the same thing with bipolar disorder. The problem with bipolar disorder is you get to a point, or that person gets to a point where they think they don't need the medication anymore.
Yeah.
and then they don't take the medication, and you have really major problems. And I've dealt
Yeah,
with
and
that.
there's a couple different types of bipolar disorder, and severity can greatly vary. There are some people who have bipolar disorder that can manage without taking medications. They'll get a little bit elevated or a little bit more depressed than the average person, but maybe not necessarily end up in the hospital. On the other hand, if you're struggling with bipolar disorder and you've had more than a couple hospitalizations, I might say, hey, we need to think about medications as part of the treatment,
Mhm.
because there's actually, with psychiatric hospitalizations, when a person gets to the point where they're decompensating enough that they have to be in the hospital, there's structural damage that's going on in the brain that is cumulative, right? So, like me going into the hospital once because I had a real bad decompensation, I got catatonic or whatever. Okay. Me going into the hospital 10 times in 2 years because that happened, I'm actually doing damage to my brain. And you have to start thinking about pros and cons of medication versus the damage that I do by not taking medication. And sometimes that's also damage to your job, your family, right? All those other things that can be affected by it.
Well, unfortunately, and speaking from an HR perspective, unfortunately, with ADA, like we had this one bipolar who went off his medication, and we had a record of him having the disease. And so, when that person did something crazy, like run through a cornfield totally naked, just strip off at work and run through a cornfield, there's nothing we can do about it as far as termination or anything else because it is protected under ADA. And so, there's three conditions under ADA. And if the person is diagnosed with it, if the person is has taken medication for it or been diagnosed in the past and is considered recovered, they're still protected. And the third one is if we suspect and verbalize that they are of that. So the minute we tell somebody I think you're crazy, then that affords them protection under ADA for being quote crazy.
Hmm.
And so if we as an untrained professional in HR diagnose somebody and say, I think you have bipolar disorder, then they're automatically protected by that under ADA.
Wow.
So it's crazy.
So as far as like other stuff, like less complex, less severe anxiety, mild depression, things like that, most of my patients do therapy only, and most of the time that's fine. Most of the time that's enough. Even PTSD, like I have many patients that I work with PTSD that are doing therapy only, and we can do great work with that, right? So in an SHTF situation, hopefully people with less complex, less severe and persistent stuff like that, we can help each other out. We can support each other. We can, learn coping skills, be active, get outside, right? Getting outside. We didn't even talk about that. That's huge. You got to get fresh air and sunshine every day. You have to. That's a huge part of your mental health. And how many people out there are not going outside? It's tons, you know. Alternatives, yes, there's definitely things in the plant world because most modern medicines were based on plant compounds, right? So there's definitely things in the plant world that can help. It gets complex because a lot of people will say, and this is just an example, I'm not endorsing this. So a lot of people will say, oh, St. John's wort helps depression. St. John's wort helps one type of depression, and it's actually contraindicated for many other types. Okay. So it's not so easy to say, this is for this and this is for this, right? Like take some foraging classes, experiment with yourself, see how you feel with.
But at the same time, there's the power of the placebo effect.
Yeah.
And so if my mind tells me, and unfortunately this can be true of some bad things as well, that something is going to be what would we say, healing, then at times my mind can perceive the healing power to such a great extent that it can actually have a
100%.
healing effect.
Yeah, 100%. It's very powerful. Everybody, not everybody gets that kind of placebo effect, but a lot of people do. I knew a girl in high school that at a high school party, they were giving her glasses of water and telling her that it was vodka, and she was acting drunk. She believed she was drunk.
Yeah.
Slurring her words, uncoordinated, and all she had all night long was water.
Wow.
Yeah. It was baffling to see it, but yeah, there is our mind is very, very powerful. We create our reality, really.
And and that's kind of like what Viktor Frankl talks about the world out there versus the world in here.
Yeah.
And I think that's also very, very important. So one more question, and I know you're a person of faith, and I know that where you work, that faith-based healing probably is not encouraged or accepted. That they want more of the
Oh no,
clinical.
it's up to the patient. It's up to the patient. In fact, we part of the training is that we have to learn about all different types of faith, and take there's most people take it seriously that whether or not I agree with your beliefs, I'm going to respect those. Most clinicians are gonna use that kind of ethics. I'm going to respect those, and I'm gonna, if you want me to, I will work with you within your beliefs. If you don't, that's okay too. We can include it or not include it. I do think that it's a very strong, powerful ally for mental health. If you have a belief system, it definitely tends to help with better results, faster results. Is it necessary? No. Does it help? Yes.
Okay. So that is a tool we definitely should consider to have in our toolbox in a post-apocalyptic world in helping our fellow human beings.
Yeah. I wanted to jump back. Somebody had a question there. Stray kittens. So it really just depends, right? Like, so I could say here's how I'll say it. Some people have had good results with kava kava root for their anxiety, right? But that doesn't mean that it's going to help every single person with anxiety, and it's much more complex than that, because kava kava root may be contraindicated with something else that you're taking, right? So you have to kind of do your own research, talk to your doctor. There's definitely, I have a whole section on foraging you can check out. I have like 80 or so videos in there about different plants and what they're known to do and that kind of thing. But I would say, on top of whatever you decide to do, please talk to your doctor, especially if you're on any other kind of medications. And some of these plant medicines too have their own addictive potentials, which you have to be careful about. There is stuff people are using to treat pain, for example, that's readily available, and it is highly addictive. So it's complex. If you could start by, like, if you say you had anxiety and you wanted to look up what are some good plant medicines for anxiety, you could Google it just like that, and it's going to give you some different options. And then you're going to have to kind of see what's in your area, learn to work with it, harvest some. Maybe you're going to make it into a tincture. Maybe you're going to have it as tea. Maybe you're just going to eat it straight. And those will do different things too. Like a tincture is much stronger than just eating the raw plant, right? But a couple other good channels to check out for that kind of stuff is Forager Chick is really good. Yohola Herbal School is really good, and both Yohola Herbal School has been on my channel twice. Forager Chick is coming on my channel soon, and
rogue preparedness is really good about herbal medicine.
Preparedness is fantastic. Mark Merriweather Vorderbruggen is probably one of the best foraging teachers in the country,
and he has a fantastic book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's got some stuff on YouTube too. But yeah, take some classes. You're going to have so much fun with it. I love foraging. I love learning about the plants, and that's part of my mental health. I go out in the woods, find a plant, research it, learn about it, taste it, and I enjoy that. That's actually probably the thing that I enjoyed most. If I have time for myself, and you said, what do you want to do? Do you want to go to the movies? Do you want to play video games? Do you want to go for a hike? Go for a hike. Let's do it.
Yeah, I'm that way about going to the lake.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. One of the things I do want to bring up is right now I'm trying to schedule. I do want some holistic healing. I think that's going to be extremely important to us as we look into the future, into a post-whatever environment. And so holistic healing is going to be extremely important to us. So I'm trying to coordinate so that I can get rogue preparedness and Big's Family Prep on at the same time to talk about herbal medicinals. I'm working with a lady. I'm trying to get a decent lady to talk about essential oils. My acupuncturist, so I'm my pain management doctor. I get a choice between either steroid injections in my spine or acupuncture. So for the first 6 months of every year, I do the acupuncture, and then once Social Security won't pay for that anymore, then I get the spinal injections. She has agreed that she'll come on and talk about acupuncture. And then I've also, let me see. So I've got herbal medicines. I've got essential oils. I've got acupuncture coming, and then I'm also talking to a person about what's the one that I'm missing that I wanted to mention that I'm bringing on reflexology, which is basically trying to cure the body through the sole of the foot.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have some homeopathic healers who will be coming on. I talked to a chiropractor Monday, and so I'm going to go back and talk to him again. I might have a chiropractor on as well. So I want to look at what are all the things that we as lay people can do to have in our book of solutions for the myriad problems that we're going to see in the near future. And I think that tonight was just basically breaking the ice with prepping with Sarge. And I think that he probably has a lot more he can share with us in the future about identifying specific things and what are some of the things that we as lay people can do to try to assist that person even more so than what we have. So I think tonight was a great icebreaker. I hope the rest of you got as much out of it as I did. And we do have things coming up. We do have one coming up. Who's Your Prepping Nurse? Cynthia Biggs from Big's Family Prep. Lori's Prepping Kitchen. And then there was one more. I forget who the other one was. We had 4 people who said, Sassy Gal Prepping. She's a social worker. And so we've got like 4 people plus Prepping with Sarge who are going to be on as a panel to discuss this very thing. We're going to have a panel discussion about it the last Monday, which is January 30th at 8 p.m. Central. So that's going to be a panel discussion. And we're going to take another I don't know how deep we'll get with 5 people on a panel, but we'll take another look at mental health in a post-apocalyptic world here on January 30th. And Sarge has agreed that he'll come back with us at least for half the show. He does have a conflict, but he'll try to make at least the first half. So a wide variety of people coming that see what we can do. God, I'm so lucky to have met such great people.
Yeah, okay. We got a great community. Lori, I just wanted to say I saw your comment there. I do feel a little bit more safe in talking about that one. Check out wild lettuce and willow bark. Do some research on those two. See what you think.
Okay, so Numbers, chapter 6. Verses 23, 24, 25, 26. So this is how you shall bless the Israelites. Say to them, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord let his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you kindly and give you peace. So do me a favor. As you look at this great community that we have developed and the phenomenal people that are in this small group, that we're so proud to be a part of, remember that we're all in this together so we can come out the other side together. Please be kind, polite, and respectful to each other, because togetherness is how we're going to get through this together. Take care. Bye-bye.